These are a really tight fit. Which is good, I guess. That means they won't be falling off when we're trying to put the manifold on. So that's something. And then hopefully they're pretty thick. I don't know what kind of material they're made out of, but it's very thick, and I can see how these would make a good seal. Alright. Just get them all on, and then I'll find something to cinch them down there. Some sort of a of all things I found, Model T hubcap, aftermarket of course, but it's got a decent diameter to it that fits over the internal rings, so I can get the gaskets seated flat against the block. You make do with what you have, right? Didn't even scuff the hubcap. I'll save that for another day. So if we remember, we had 3 of these studs, come out of the block when we took the manifold off in the first place, which was not a big deal. They didn't, pull out, they just unscrewed. So we're just going to put them back in the way they came out. That'll work. This thing is pretty heavy. Alright, where does this go? So the whole idea with these rings and gaskets is that when you look down like this from the top, you won't be able to see the internal rings. You'll just be able to see a sliver of that gray washer gasket all the way across on all the ports. So that will be the goal for cinching this up. So I can't get the camera on all of them at the same time, but I'll get them on this side over here so you can see what I'm talking about. We want to cinch these up uniformly. These would be good nuts to retorque after the engine has run for a while and then completely cooled down again. Come back out and retorque these once just to make sure that they aren't going to travel. And then they'll likely be good for another 100 years. All right. That is tight. So you've got a nice uniform seat and crush against these washer gaskets all the way across here. For the record, these nuts here were 7/8, and I'm going to put the exhaust on now, and these nuts down here are 3/4. Starting to look like a tractor again a little bit. All right, let's hook up some of this linkage. This timer linkage the bracket goes underneath this first head bolt. So we've got our timer linkage reinstalled. Put a little oil on it so it actually move. If you remember in the previous video when we installed the timer, I made that static timing mark right here with the white paint. So this is where we want our lever to be adjusted at full retard. And in this case, it's very close. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to physically bend this rod a little bit right here. And if you've never seen one of these before, this is a spark rod bending iron. T2188 BFO. It's just a big wrench with a gap in there. You stick it in there and it gives you, you stick it over the top of the rod, either direction, then it gives you leverage to bend the rod this way. So I'm going to put her down here, seeing if I can influence just a little bit. I want to straighten this rod out just a little bit to get that mark perfectly lined up. Just a little bit more. All right, I'm happy with that. If you look here, also see how close this nut on the timer is to this rod. If that nut touches the rod, it's not going to function properly. Electricity is going to go somewhere else. So, in this full retarded position, it is not touching the rod, but it is very close. So, what I think I'll do is put some sort of insulating material on. I guess the rod would be the easiest one to do it, just to be safe. That way we don't accidentally ground out the system. Rather than overthink this situation, I'm just going to put some electrical tape on this rod for now. Don't grade me on appearance here on this one. All right. We're happy with that. Okay, I'm going to go around to the driver's seat and advance the spark. Right now we're at full retard, full advance, full retard, full advance, full retard. That's how we want it. That looks good. Throttle linkage. Hooked up, oiled, working. Choke, hooked up, oiled, working. And of course we tested the spark linkage already and set to our static timing mark. when I hooked up the throttle linkage right here to the mixer assembly, you know, inside the mixer here at the bottom is another butterfly valve which actually regulates the throttle, so to speak. This rod comes in here, and there's sort of a couple little half moon shaped pieces of metal affixed to this cup here that connect to the butterfly rod. But when you hook it up, again, because I've never done this before, I'm just going by what looks right and what I think. I couldn't tell if by turning the throttle rod it was actually actuating this butterfly. I couldn't tell just by looking. So what I had to do real quick was I had to remove this mixer assembly from the top of the manifold again. So I took this big nut off, took the two big screw head nuts off, and of course the fresh air pipe on the back as well. Popped it off and raised it up just about that far so I could look up in there and see if the butterfly was rotating. And son of a gun if it wasn't rotating just like it's supposed to, opening and closing when I was turning the throttle rod. So that made me very happy. Reinstalled the mixer assembly and cinched down this nut on this cup. So this is all tight and right, and it actually works. So here we have it, Holley 295 vaporizer nightmare assembly reinstalled. The linkage is all hooked up and working. Timer's hooked up and working and set. So the next thing that I'm going to do is try to start this engine. I'm going to hook up a battery to it, hook up some sort of a temporary fuel system. If it pops, if it starts to actually run, then I'll stop what I'm doing, and at that point I'll reinstall the entire radiator and the cooling system and the gas tank and all that. But for now, I don't need any of that. The motor will run for a short time without any coolant in it at all, because after all, these are a thermal siphon system, so it takes a little while for the coolant inside the block to heat up enough to rise and then get up to the radiator and then go through and begin the thermal siphon system. So for the first, you know, whatever time it is, 30 seconds or 2 minutes or 3 minutes that you start these old engines up, same with Model Ts, there's no cooling going on at all. So we're safe to start this without any coolant in it and run it just for a few seconds. So again, I just want to make sure this is going to run before I go to the trouble of fixing the radiator and installing it and the gas tank and all that, because that's a big job in itself. Holley 295 vaporizer. Done.